today's video I want to take a look at side letters to commercial leases. Now, side letters to commercial leases may be an obscure enough topic, but if you're entering into a lease or have entered into a lease and the question of a side letter arises between you and the landlord, then this video may be of interest to you. A side letter in a commercial lease is basically a letter which will modify the terms of the lease for a temporary period of time, and possibly only for one particular tenant. Generally it will be used to perhaps agree a reduction in the rent for a temporary period of time. There's a number of things though, and the reason that you might use a side letter rather than actually issue a new lease or a formal modification or alteration of the existing lease is that you don't want it in the temporary or in the public domain. It is to be temporary, and you only want it for a specific lessee and a specific period of time. Some points to consider though in relation to a side letter to a commercial lease. The time period or the special event which is to be covered by this side letter should be clear, and it should be clear as well whether the time period is going to be temporary and if it's for the particular lessee. Secondly, if the lease contains an entire agreement clause, then the side letter should be mentioned in the entire agreement statement. In other words, there may well be an entire agreement clause in the lease, and if that's the case, then it may be harder or more difficult to rely on the side letter as evidence of any change or modification. If the side letter is agreed and granted at a different time from the lease itself, then there should be some consideration given for the side letter, even if it's only a nominal sum. The landlord needs to be careful about the granting of a side letter, because you do not, if you're the landlord, want to inadvertently let a guarantor off the hook if that's not your intention. You need to consider as well whether the side letter is to be binding on a future landlord if he or she sells the building, for example. Is the side letter personal to the particular tenant, the particular lessee, or can it be passed on to a new lessee if the tenant sells his lease? And finally, the side letter will be terminated if any provisions of the lease are breached. For example, late payment of rent, then all bets are off and the side letter goes up in smoke. These are just some of the things that you need to consider when a question of a side letter to a commercial lease is raised. It could be raised by the landlord or indeed the tenant. Generally, as I say, it's to do with a temporary alteration, a temporary reduction in rent, and the benefit, as I say, of the side letter and not anything else is simply that the landlord doesn't want the word getting out that the rent has been reduced, because it may affect adjoining tenants, adjoining properties, adjoining landowners, or it could even be in a shopping centre, for example, where again the actual rent being paid may be a factor, obviously, when it comes to reviewing the rent of adjoining units. So that's why the side letter would be used. It's a kind of an off the record, off the formal record, as it were, outside the lease agreement or modification on a temporary basis, but it is absolutely valid. There's a leading UK case as well to do with this. It's Vivian Westwood Limited versus Conduit Street Development Limited. It's a leading UK case. This decision is not binding on the Irish courts, but probably would be persuasive, because Irish and UK law in this whole area of landlord and tenant would be very similar, and decisions tend to be similar. You can read an interview, or an article rather, on my website businessandlegal.ie about side letters. If you just go to the website, Terry Gorry and Company Solicitors website, businessandlegal.ie, do a search for side letters in the Google search box and you will find the article. It may be of benefit to you. If you find this video useful, you might give it the old thumbs up down below, and you may be interested in subscribing to my YouTube channel, especially if you have any interest in Irish law or in Irish business I make a couple of videos a week, one Wednesday, one Saturday, stick them up on YouTube, and they are quite popular. I attempt to explain basic concepts in Irish law in plain language, and I also share my experience as an entrepreneur and small business owner. As I say, if you find this useful, please give it a thumbs up down below. Thank you.